Tonight is Tom Cotton, Republican senator from Arkansas. He's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. He's also the author of a new book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China. Senator, good evening. We'll talk about that book in just a second. I want to get your take on what is happening here with what's being said about Ukraine, about the war, and how you see it as head of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Yeah, Brett, obviously there's been a little sparring between President Trump and President Zelensky this week, but I think they'll move beyond that because they have a shared goal, which is to bring an end to the fighting in Ukraine with a few common objectives. One is a lasting and durable truce. 2 is to secure, as J.D. Vance said in Europe last week, Ukraine's sovereign independence. And 3 is to ensure there's not a third invasion of Ukraine by Russia in the future. The first one happened on Barack Obama's watch. The second one happened on Joe Biden's watch. President Trump, by contrast, was able to prevent any such aggression by Russia in his first term, and it was President Trump that provided the weapons, in fact, that allowed Ukraine to fight off the invasion in February of 2022 and win the Battle of Kyiv. Now, we don't know exactly what the contours of that truce will look like. We may have to get creative in some ways, like this proposal to have a minerals deal with Ukraine that would give Ukraine a solid basis for some post-war economic growth as they rebuild their country. It would also provide the United States with badly needed diversification for the minerals that we need for our economy that we currently are dependent on China for. So I think there may be some creative solutions that haven't been on the table yet, but I do know that we want to get to the same place, which is a lasting truce that prevents a third invasion of Ukraine.
But does the rhetoric hurt? You know, some noted conservatives are pushing back hard against the president. National Review says Ukraine didn't start the war. Ukraine is not the problem. In breathtaking remarks to reporters, President Trump poured contempt on Ukraine for its frustration. Ukraine didn't fire Russian missiles at itself or direct a Russian armed column at its own capital in 2022. There's moral equivalence, and then there's total moral inversion. And then you've got Mark Levin, who says Zelensky is not a dictator. Take a listen.
Ordered martial law. That's what the Constitution there compelled. Zelensky hasn't called for an election. That's what the Constitution there compels. Now, I'm waiting for the first free election for Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is almost comical in a sick way that Putin is demanding an election. Why is he demanding an election in Ukraine when he doesn't have free and real elections in his own country?
So the going take is that this rhetoric, no matter if it's negotiating, is empowering Putin in not a good way in their eyes.
Well, Brett, I don't think the president has empowered Vladimir Putin at all. And again, if you look at what he did in his first term, it objectively was hostile to Russia. For instance, he leaned on Germany to stop the gas pipeline that made Germany so dependent on Russian gas. It caused Germany to kind of be soft on the potential invasion of Ukraine in 2021 and 2022. The president committed to more oil and gas production both in his first term and his second term. That's directly antagonistic towards Russia since they depend on oil and gas production. And again, the president supported throughout his first term the very weapons that allowed Ukraine to defend itself during the second invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So again, I know there have been some sparks this week, but I suspect we'll move beyond that pretty quickly because President Trump and President Zelensky have the same goal. I think that's the goal of all Americans and Ukrainians, is to bring an end to the fighting, have a lasting truce, protect Ukraine's sovereign independence, and prevent a third future invasion of Ukraine.
All right, your book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China, just out. And listen, you were the first person to talk about the possibility of a lab leak from Wuhan. We covered the first story here on Special Report, and we're called conspiracy theorists for doing it. There are things in this book that are real warnings, red flares about what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely, Brett. I wrote this book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China, because I want to ring the alarm for normal Americans who have a justly low opinion of communist China, but they may not understand just how bad it is. Not just that China has been waging an economic world war against America's workers and businesses or is preparing their military for war against the United States, but China has infiltrated our society, our government. You mentioned the coverage that this network had about the Wuhan coronavirus likely originating in a laboratory. Fox News is the only network in America that's not owned by or affiliated with a Hollywood movie studio. And all those Hollywood movie studios are dependent upon China giving them access to their large, lucrative movie market. Do you really trust all those other networks to shoot you straight about Communist China's crimes? I don't. But that's just an example of the influence that we've allowed communist China to gain in our society because of our massive economic dependence in China's wealth and power.
Senator, quickly, do you think we are destined for some kind of confrontation with China?
No, I don't believe in destiny in that way. Everything depends on human choice, individual choice, and our choices collectively. The American people know that Communist China is a threat. They are prepared to do what's necessary to deter that threat, not to win a war against China, but to prevent one from ever happening by having a strong military, by being confident in the assertion of American interest, and by standing up to China's crimes against America's workers and businesses. That's the way we make sure the next century is an American century, not a communist Chinese century.
Okay, the book is 7 Things You Can't Say About China. Senator Cotton, thanks for the time.
Thank you.